The last time I heard Trump talk about opioids, I mean, you don't even hear anything about the commission that his former employee, Kellyanne Conway, used to head. They don't talk about opioids at all in the Trump administration. It doesn't make any news at all out of the White House. Probably more than 2 years now. You just don't hear a lot about it. Well, it has increased in more than 40 states across the US, overdoses. So the drug became his friend. Pandemic drives hike in opioid deaths. In the months since the pandemic took hold in the US, the opioid plague has taken a sharp turn for the worse. More than 40 states have seen evidence of increases in overdoses. On the first Friday in June, Jeffrey Cameron, 29, left his home around midnight to buy heroin. He had been struggling with addiction for several years, but had seemingly turned a corner, holding down a job that he loved at Basil Pizzeria, driving his teenage sister to the mall to go shopping and sharing a home with his grandmother. But then the coronavirus pandemic hit. When he returned home that night and tried the product, it was so potent that he fell and hit his head in the bathroom. Mr. Cameron texted a friend soon after saying that he had messed up and would go to a 12-step meeting with his friend that weekend. I promise I'm good and I can't get in any more trouble tonight, he wrote. Sweet dreams. If you wake up before you hear from me, definitely call. The sooner I get up and into town, the better. When Mr. Cameron woke up, he used the rest of the powder, largely fentanyl, not heroin. His family would later learn from a small bag with a bunny stamped on it. Less than 5 hours after he sent the text, his grandmother found him dead. In 6 months since, COVID 19 brought the nation to a standstill. With the opioid plague has taken a sharp turn for the worse. More than 40 states have recorded increases in opioid related deaths since the pandemic began, according to the American Medical Association. In Arkansas, the use of Narcan, an overdose reversing drug, has tripled. Jacksonville, Florida has seen a 40% increase in overdose related deaths. In March alone, York County, Pennsylvania recorded 3 times more overdose deaths than normal. For Mr. Cameron, the shutdown of daily life in the spring not only led him back to drugs, but led him to use alone, an especially dangerous proposition. Usually he would use with somebody, especially if it's a different dealer or different batch, said his mother, Tara Rail. I don't think he had that person to use with, to have that safety net. Mm-mm-mm. Wow. Mr. Cameron lived in East Barrow, a small town about 20 miles outside of the state capital of Montpelier. He drove a red Subaru Legacy and had a pet snake named Lucy, and was passionate about making food for others. For 2 days after he died, the pizza shop he worked for closed its doors. Now his picture's plastered in the window, and customers can buy car decals, t shirts, and bracelets made in his memory. When Vermont shut down in March, so did Mr. Cameron's job, which provided his biggest support network. He was lonely and had money to spare. The $600 per week he received in extra unemployment benefits from the federal government was more than he earned on his job. Jeffrey hated being alone, and the last couple of weeks he was said Mrs. Rail, who was 47. His grandmother had gone to Atlanta to visit her other children and had delayed flying home for fear of catching COVID-19. In her absence, Mr. Cameron started keeping the television turned to her favorite channel, blaring Western movies and Bonanza reruns. He was home alone a lot, Miss Rail said, and I think the drug became his friend. Mr. Cameron had stopped taking Suboxone, a medication that helped suppress the cravings and withdrawal symptoms that plague people addicted to opioids. Last fall, it has been found sharply to reduce the risk of dying from an overdose. He had grown tired of taking it after 3 years, his mother said. Opioid addiction have been a scourge in Vermont for more than 2 decades. When dealers and illegal drug organizations realized they could charge more for narcotics here, they could in nearby cities such as Boston, New York, and Montreal. The market was flooded as painkillers that many young Vermonters became addicted to in the early 2000s grew harder to get. Starting about a decade ago, heroin moved in. Then came fentanyl, which is far more potent and has driven up deaths in almost every corner of the country. Last year, after aggressive efforts to expand access to treatment, Vermont saw its first decrease in opioid related deaths since 2014. That year, then Governor Pete Shulin devoted his entire state message to what he called a full blown heroin crisis gripping Vermont. But Vermont saw 82 opioid overdoses through July of this year, up from 60 during the same period last year. Nowhere in the state is as hard hit as Windham County, which borders New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and typically has the highest yearly number of opioid related deaths. In the first 3 months of this year, emergency workers in Brattleboro, the largest town, responded to 10 overdose calls, none of them fatal. But by August, they had responded to a total of 53 overdoses, including 7 that were fatal. So I guess what they're saying is since these people are not working, they now have all the time in the world to do a bunch of drugs. And opioids is now exploding in most of the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, this definitely didn't go anywhere. Now, you got this on top of the 210,000 coronavirus deaths. And now you got the opioid deaths going on simultaneously. Wow. I guess if it keeps going at this rate, it won't be too many people left. Oof. Many of the recent lethal overdoses in town have taken place at hotels. We immediately saw a skyrocket in the amount of substance that people were using. They go to hotels, huh? Mm. Not all drug related deaths during the pandemic have been from overdoses. Jessie Mae DaCosta, 32, died from sepsis, an infection that she got from injecting drugs. COVID kind of sealed Jessie's fate, said her mother. Mm-mm-mm. So these are just a bunch of stories of people that have overdosed and died um, during the pandemic. And this probably is not going to end anytime soon. Remember, opioids have been going 22 years now, and it has never slowed down. And if you remember when Trump got into office his first year, he said he was going to get rid of opioid addiction. Don't look like he kept his word. In fact, It got stronger since he took office. It did not slow down at all. But y'all, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.